a couple nights ago, William did the prayers. Bonnie, would you like to do the prayers tonight?
Be glad to.
Okay, good.
We're doing English only?
Yeah, let's do English tonight. That'll be fine.
Okay. So 3 times will be all English.
Okay,
Is that correct? Is that what you want?
correct, yes.
Okay. All mother sentient beings, especially
Those enemies who hate
me, obstructors
who harm me,
and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Taking the Bodhisattva vow. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas.
I'm sorry, Bonnie, you skipped page 2 and 3.
Oh, you know what? Every time I turn this page, that happens. They must kind of stick together. Thank you. Action Bodhicitta prayer. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Long Refuge Prayer. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the exalted order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. Taking the Bodhisattva vow. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to Bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to Bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to Bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Short refuge prayer. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. The four immeasurables. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion.
Thank you. Very good. If Kay and Noman, if you do not have one of these books and you would like one, please just write me an email with your mailing address and I will put it in an envelope and send it to you. But
That's very kind. Thank you.
Okay. This is our Buddhism 101 prayer book. So it doesn't
Okay.
have all our prayers, but it's got the main prayers that we do for these practices and teaching.
Okay.
All right, thank you,
Okay.
Lance. If I have one, I'm okay.
Okay, very good. I'm glad you got one. Okay. So tonight we are continuing our talk on the method to attain enlightenment, for the practice of achieving Buddhahood as it's expressed in the book. So we've learned, what our aspirations are, what we should be cultivating as our aspirations. And now we've been going into the method of how it is that we actually put ourselves on the path to become a Buddha. So I'm just going to give a little bit of a review. And in this section here, it's talking about the 6 perfections. The 6 perfections are the perfection of generosity, the perfection of moral ethics or discipline, the perfection of patience, the perfection of perseverance, the perfection of meditative concentration or mindfulness, and the perfection of wisdom awareness. So thus far, we've talked about the first five. Tonight, we're going to be concentrating on wisdom awareness. But these six perfections are called, in Sanskrit language, they're called the Paramitas. So you may see that in the readings and the prayers. So these are the perfections. And they are what is classified as the three mind trainings, that we are training our mind in regard to the perfection of generosity, moral ethics, discipline, creating, maintaining patience and perseverance. So this is training our mind to focus on what our practices are, what our teachings are, and so on. And then the next mind training is on the intellectualization of the practices of comprehension and meditation, how it is that we do that, to instill a mindfulness of ourselves in knowing what this phenomenal nature is and what it is that we're trying to accomplish, which is liberation from this ocean of suffering that is this phenomenal nature. So we call this phenomenal nature samsara, is the name in Sanskrit, samsara. And as we learn to how we can liberate from that, as we learn how to be able to transcend ourselves from out of this ocean of suffering, we attain the level of what we call nirvana. And this nirvana is a sense of transcendence, as a bliss and a happiness and a peacefulness and an awareness. And it is the other side of this ocean of suffering of samsara. So it is not the annihilation, or it's not the overcoming of samsara. It is being able to recognize that we have a dualistic nature. Sometimes we can be suffering, sometimes we can be very happy. If we're happy, we could say that there's elements of nirvana in that. If we're sad or we're suffering, we can say there's elements of samsara there. So coming to recognize our dualistic nature, samsara and nirvana, is part of the mindfulness practice. And then, so let me see. So we were talking about, so to say it again, the training in superior morality, the training in superior thought, which is this intellectualization, and the training in superior wisdom awareness. So this is where we begin tonight. So does anybody have any questions or comments that you want to discuss before we get into this?
So
Yes.
just to have a quick question, Lance. So nirvana is still dualistic, right?
Yes. Yes.
In what sense is that dualistic? Because like if your mind becomes I don't know how to ask this question.
Well, because it is temporary. It's not permanent.
Okay.
And I mean, the metaphor I like to use is that we're in this, ocean of suffering, and we're in this, this water, but then we can go above the water. We can rise out of the water, and we're in this atmosphere above the water, and that is the nirvana. But while we're in this space above the water of suffering, we can fall back. We can lapse, we can fall back into samsara, because the nirvana is not permanent, it is temporary.
So basically what's holding us back is the habits, our own body, and pretty much being engaged in the daily life.
And the unripened karmas that have
Uh-huh.
yet to come up that, we're not, we haven't been able to overcome. We haven't been able to recognize that there are these karmas at play when the conditions and the causes and conditions come together. Then all of a sudden, those hidden karmic seeds begin to sprout and come up that we didn't expect. So, it pulls us back into our suffering. So the more that we familiarize ourselves with the superior thought and being able to recognize these things, the quicker that we're able to neutralize those dualistic problems that come up. And we apply all the teachings that we've been learning to be able to do that, to be able to recognize those things as they come up.
Okay, that makes sense.
So Lance,
Yes.
Since it's apparent that samsara and nirvana are not, doesn't really work to consider them spaces or places like some beginners would imagine, would it be considered true then that that nirvana and samsara are basically the same experience, like waves on the ocean instead of above the ocean, but the wave coming up? Are they two sides of the same experience, or are they just I mean, how would you describe that as not a place?
Well, they're the two sides of phenomenal nature, of being able to recognize phenomenal nature. We live in phenomenal nature. That's our ordinary existence, is phenomenal nature. And it can be, we're either happy or we're suffering. Everybody wants to be happy, but in the process of being happy, we may be very much suffering, or we may attain that happiness, but that happiness turns back into suffering as we get older and things begin to change in our bodies and things begin to change in our life. Neither one is permanent. The suffering isn't permanent, and neither is the happiness permanent. And that is the nature of phenomenal nature. Is impermanence, is temporariness. And that we create that. We create that impermanence. We are, because of what we need to do as practitioners to learn how to stabilize our meditative concentration so that our wisdom awareness now rises above the vicissitudes of that samsara and nirvana. And we remain stable in that. And that's when we attain the level of the Bodhisattva or the Buddha.
Thank you.
So I hope that explains it a little bit anyway. All these things are, food for meditation, food for thought, food for, reading more things, delving into it. Everything that we're doing here is just basically introductions to the vocabulary.
Yeah.
But by no means is it going to be a complete explanation, and by no means is it going to be an experience for any one of us to be able to realize, oh, this is what it is, and now I got it, and now I'm I got this higher consciousness. It's merely a means to be able to introduce you to these concepts. And concepts is what phenomenal nature is all about. It's all conceptual. To be in the Buddha nature is non-conceptual. It's beyond our ability to be able to express it. It's beyond our ability to contemplate it. What we can do, though, is we can exhaust all these concepts as being temporary, as being phenomenal. And then as we do that, and we finally get to the point of exhaustion, we then just, we rest our mind. We say, oh, I can't think about this anymore. And then steadily, slowly, we transcend into the meditative concentration level or the meditative awareness level, where we have glimpses of what it is to be an enlightened being. And then, because we're not stable, it comes back. We come back, but we bring something back with us. We bring back that experience of that glimpse that we had. And we say, oh, it is possible. And then we look back at all our Dharma teachings and we see, oh, now I understand what all this other stuff that we've been building up to means, that we've been creating the stability to be able to recognize those glimpses and to be able to embody those glimpses as our true nature here in our heart. You know, we all have Buddha nature. So we need to, we have to recognize is a first part of this, recognize the dualistic nature, and then to be able to transcend that into the absolute nature. So those are called the two truths, the relative truth and the absolute truth. So we're going to explore that a little bit later on in the book. In a couple of weeks, we'll be talking about that more. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. So this wisdom awareness is this transcendent awareness, being able to come out of our body, or not literally, but figuratively, that we rest our physical body and we rest our intellectual mind, and then we have this transcendent experience that I just mentioned. So this is what that is. So TM, transcendental meditation, is a system that teaches that, and it's a very valid system. It's something I learned many years ago and very important and is part of what we do. So it's a very good basis on which we move along. So in being able to understand this wisdom awareness, it's broken down into these different levels. So it's broken down first into a relative level, or relative knowledge, which is called a Vinaya. Excuse me, 1 second. Vijnana. If I'm not pronouncing it right, please correct me, because I'm not a very good language person. Vijnana, which represents the relative knowledge that has been tested and realized as temporal, meaning temporary. It's a relative knowledge that has been tested and realized as temporal. So this is like the Vinaya teachings. That's the proper way to pronounce it, Vinaya. It's the Vinaya teachings. They're the teachings of discipline. They're the teachings of moral ethics. They're the basic teachings of learning what the mechanics, if you will, the mechanics of what this phenomenal nature is. The different sciences that we're familiar with, the things that cause happiness, the things that cause suffering, the everyday things that we go through, the physics of what we go through. We could say that this is the quantum physics of things, and that as we observe the phenomenal nature, we have the ability to be able to move that phenomenal nature because of our interpretation of what it means. So they say in quantum physics that the observer manifests an outcome in what it's observing, because it has an expectation and it's looking for that. But whether it's actually there or not, I don't know. I'm not a physicist like that, but I think it's something like that, that we are part of the phenomenal nature. And if we remain in that phenomenal nature, we're gaining all this knowledge about it, but it's all temporary knowledge. At some point, it all becomes transcended. It's all true in the sense that for this space and time, it has appearances to be true, but the essence of it is impermanence. The essence of it is that it's not existent, that it is only compounded stuff that we're observing. And when the compounds, when we get further down into the compounds, down into the very essence of what they are, then these things cease to exist. And we get down to the very basic elements. And the very basic elements are what we are looking for, that help us to be able to recognize this phenomenal nature, then to be able to transcend it and be able to go to what is then the absolute nature. So this Vinaya, these Vijnana, is the empty illusory objects, empty illusory objects. So we are interpreting these appearances to mean certain things that we agree on. They have conventional meaning. We say that, these beads are brown beads. We agree that they're beads and we agree that they're brown. But, somebody else from some other place may have totally different names for these things. And they may mean different things to someone else. We may see these just as wooden beads. Somebody else may see these as food. An animal might see this as food. We may have a glass of water and we say, oh, that's something that we're going to drink. But a fish might say, oh, that's where I live. That's the air that I breathe. That's what I breathe. That's how I live. But we see it just as something to drink to quench our thirst. So it's a matter of perspective, where it is that we're coming from and so on. So it's all relative. It's all relative to how it's made, because it's all compounded stuff, and it's relative to how it's experienced, depending on what the experiencer is, who the experiencer is. So this is the empty illusory objects of phenomenal nature. So all these things that we think are permanent will, if you take them outside, let them into the elements, after a period of time, they all break down and they all go back into their essential elements and so on. When we die and they bury us in the ground or whatever, we go back to our essential elements and it all breaks apart and so on. Right now, we like to think of ourselves as being permanent. But the truth is, it's all compounded stuff, and it's all the same stuff that all the other things around us are made up of, and all the things that are in the cosmos are all made up of. So in this way, we are all the same. This is the equanimity. When we talk about equanimity, the sameness of all things, we're made up of the same materials. So in transcendent awareness, we first have to be aware of this phenomenal nature, of these appearances, and be able to rest in that, to not be threatened by that. Initially, we might have a degree of fear about that. Say, well, I never thought of myself as being impermanent. I don't like to think of myself as dying. I certainly don't like to think of myself as decomposing and falling apart and so on. But it's essential that we recognize this temporary nature, this compounded nature that is empty of its own innate nature, its own innate qualities. So we become the knower. This is the knower in a sense of understanding this relative under this relative stuff. We could say that it's like being a scientist. You know, science means to know. Psi is a Greek word that means to know, science. It's knowing, but it's knowing all this stuff around us. But, you know, we know it in its conventional meaning. Do we know it in its essence meaning? And its essence is emptiness. So hearing this and thinking about this is one thing, is what do you call vicarious. You're learning vicariously through something that you read or something that you heard me say. It's a vicarious experience. And until you meditate on this, until you contemplate this, until you experience the relative nature of this and accept the relative nature of this, it remains vicarious. And it doesn't have a inner meaning to you. You're not the knower. You know, you're not the knower of this phenomenal knowledge. You're maybe the observer of it, but you're not the knower of it. So then what we are knowing, what we are learning is this knowledge, this inseparable from the total, this knowledge inseparable from the total experience of reality. So this is called jhana, the knowledge that is inseparable from the total experience of reality. So what does that mean? So now this means being able to understand this relative, but also in terms of the absolute, along with the absolute. But the absolute for us as human beings is experiential. It's not something that we can comprehend, but it is something that we can experience. So developing the superior thought that we were doing in meditative concentration is what enables us to be able to do this, to be able to have now the wisdom awareness that we're looking at right now. So the next key point is what's called prajna. Prajna is the absolute primordial innate wisdom, the ultimate reality, recognizing the deceptive nature, essence of appearances and the knowing mind that projects them is the perfection of transcendent wisdom. So this prajna now is having this wisdom that is this ultimate wisdom that is beyond our ability to be able to comprehend it. We experience it when we rest our intellectual mind, when we rest our body. So it's like we take the energy from our body, we take the energy from our brain, and now it's being, focused on this meditation that now raises us above what we normally are capable of recognizing and thinking about and acting upon and so on. I remember years ago, we used to say, and I think they still say that, for a human being to function, it takes 15% of his brain. For us to do everything that we do, it takes 15% of the brain. So where's the other 85%? So we could say that maybe, some of this 85%, if not all of it, but some of this is activated when we open it up to this superhuman ability of knowledge, which we call Buddha nature, Buddha mind, Buddha thought. So we call it the Buddha, the awakened one. Other traditions have other names for it. They might call it God, they might call it Christ, they might call it Krishna, they have Brahma, they have different names for it. And in the essence, they all may be true, just giving a different name to a different, to the same essence of this indescribable, inexpressible, non-conceptual awareness that is within us. So we call it Buddha. So this prajna is this wisdom of being able to now appreciate this reality that we've only been witnessing. We've only been part of one part of this reality. We think that what we see and everything is reality. This is only a smidgen of what reality is in this sense of prajna. We have glimpses of this reality that is beyond our human comprehension in our dreams and in our meditation. So not all our dreams are like that. Our most of our dreams are about stuff, our emotional dreams, stuff that are reflections on things that happen during the day or things that are about to happen, things that we're thinking about and so on like that. But, you know, at some time during the middle of the night, we have this very deep dreams, and sometimes we can go into these very symbolic things, very symbolic experiences that can be, at the very least, windows into this reality that we need to be able to experience through our meditation. The more that we have the experience with the meditation, true meditation, the more those dreams begin to make sense. They all seem to come together at that point. So we see that the dreams are like a window into the reality. The meditation is like a doorway into the reality. So we talk a lot about this when we talk about the bardos. And the bardos are the intermediate states. So we are in the waking state. This is our waking state. And during this waking state, we can have dreams, which is one of the bardos, the dream bardo, and we can have the meditation bardo. The dream bardo is involuntary. The dream bardo happens, you know, spontaneously. You know, all our senses are completely resting. All our senses are completely turned off while we're in sleep. But we have these experiences that we call these dreams that are involuntary, opening the window into reality, into this reality, this super reality, if you want to think of it in that way. It's beyond our normal comprehension. That's involuntary. When we do meditation is completely voluntary, completely controlled. So that's why we need to learn all these things to be able to prepare us to be able to do that. Because when we go into the meditation, there are thoughts that may come up. There are emotional thoughts that may come up that pull us back into our ordinary mind and so on. So we have to be prepared for them and be able to know how to deal with them, to be able to cut them off or compartmentalize them. There's different techniques to be able to deal with those thoughts so that we can maintain that transcendental mind, that prajna wisdom mind, and be able to experience now this bardo of reality. So when we die, we go through the bardo of death. And it's a very small part of the bardo, but it's a very important part. And there's a great deal of teaching that goes into this. So I'm just introducing it to you. So there's this bardo of death. And whatever we are charged with at that time, if we're angry, we're taking that anger into our death. And no matter what good things we did, no matter how calm we've been, no matter what levels of awareness, of awakeness that we have attained, if we go into the death bardo angry, it like almost cancels out all that good stuff that we've done already. It's like pulling the rug from underneath of us. So this is one reason why we've said many times that being in control of your death is a great gift that you give yourself. So we need to recognize what it is that causes anger, what it is that causes jealousy, what it is that causes delusion, these emotions. So if we take these emotions into that bardo of death, that time of death, that only lasts a few moments, that it is very powerful and becomes a dictator of what happens afterwards. We carry that with us into what comes next is the bardo of reality. So the bardo of reality is now we've left our physical body behind. We've left our intellect behind. All our memories are gone. All our knowledge is gone. All that is gone. All that we become is a spiritual mental body, it's referred to as a spiritual mental body. And what is that is made of is our karma. How strong is our karma? What directions is our karma taking us? Is it taking us into the positive? Is it taking us into the negative? Is it taking us into the ignorant? Is it taking us into the jealousy? You know, where is it going? And it's looking for an identity, because during this whole time that we've been living for however long, 50, 60, 70, 80 years, we've had this identity. And this identity is like a protection from this mental body, from this spiritual body, in the sense that we're afraid of that. We're learning to love that. We're learning that this is our essence. This is where we want to be. This is our true nature. All this other stuff is just all contrived. It's just all made up. It's all temporary. It's all fabricated. So we have to exhaust all those things. Say, oh, this doesn't work. That doesn't work. I tried this. That didn't work. And then finally you get to the point of, well, let me try something that's spiritual. And then the spirituality is teaching you, okay, you got to let go of all that materialistic stuff, including your body, including your life. You can have appreciation for your life. You can have appreciation for your body because it's what's brought you this far. But at some point, it becomes the thing that holds you back. So we have to learn that and recognize that, make it our own. And then we begin to have the gnosis. We have the knowledge of the reality. We have the knowledge of the absolute, the gnosis. In Greek, that is to know. You know, I said before, when we know, we're having knowledge, but we're having knowledge of these appearances. We're having knowledge of this relative phenomenal level and so on. This science that we know about all this stuff. But we know that every time we learn something, there's much more to learn. The scientists are always finding that out. But this gnosis now is something that is transcendent. It subsumes all these other things. All these other things are just merely a display of that gnosis, of that prajna wisdom. And we experience that glimpse after glimpse, after glimpse after glimpse. The glimpses become broader, they become deeper, they become more visions, they become more stable, and then we bring them in, and then our life, as we come back from the meditative experience where we're experiencing that wisdom awareness, we bring it back into our ordinary life, and we now become the embodiment of that. We become enlightened. Enlightened doesn't necessarily mean that it happens in one moment like that. Enlightenment can come in progressive levels, in little glimpses, and it begins to build and build and build, and it gets like a threshold. It gets like a certain a point where there's a shift in awareness, and you begin to recognize things in a different way. So we say that right now, we've got our ordinary mind, and that meditative mind that I'm talking about, that's extraordinary. To us ordinary beings, that seems so extraordinary. My goodness, who would have something like that? But a Buddha, only but a God, somebody, someone of a transcendent nature that is beyond what I'm capable of. But once we have that experience, once we begin to stabilize that, then that becomes the ordinary mind. And then this mind that we've been calling ordinary, that becomes the extraordinary mind. That becomes the defiled mind. And to the transcendent ordinary mind, this is extraordinary. Why would anybody want to live like this? Why would anybody want to have this kind of a life? This kind of suffering, subject themselves to this kind of dualistic nature, of uncertainty all the time. So all this has to do with wisdom awareness, being able to see the relative, and being able to have an appreciation for this wisdom awareness, this prajna wisdom awareness that we are working toward. And maybe at different times in our lives, we've all had these glimpses in our dreams. Maybe we had a meditative experience. Maybe the meditative experience wasn't the kind of thing where you were sitting on a cushion for a half an hour, 2 hours, or 3 days, or whatever it was. Maybe it wasn't that. Maybe it was just something very simple, very seemingly every day, where you were sitting on a boat on a lake, calmly fishing, or maybe you were on a mountaintop and you're just sitting there and the wind is blowing at you, and you have this epiphany. Maybe it's like laying on the beach and you're laying in the sun, and all of a sudden you look down at the sand and you see the sand, and it's like the sand just opens up. You see all the structure of the sand. It looks like a mosaic, and you begin to see things in a different way. Your eyes begin to see things in a different way. Your ears begin to hear things in a different way. Everything feels different to you. Everything you think of is different, and so on. And you're having that kind of an experience. Maybe you had it when you were 5 years old. Maybe you had it when you were 20 years old. Because we're already spiritual beings. We already have these potentials within us. The problem is we haven't had any means to be able to recognize them. Now, this is what we're learning, is what it is to recognize the spirituality, the spiritual body. What does it think? What does it look like? And what is it, it looks like us. It thinks like us. But at the same time, it can be transcendent, and then what we think of thinking now becomes something different. We begin to think like enlightened beings, and all this stuff we simplify, all this stuff we dismiss, all this stuff we say, why am I spending time thinking about these things? Why am I spending time trying to get these material things? Why am I wasting my time doing this? Our whole life seems to turn around, but it turns around with joy. It turns around with a big smile on our face. We recognize and develop our Bodhicitta, the holy enlightened mind. Everything becomes loving kindness. Everything becomes compassion. Everything becomes joy. Everything becomes equanimity, all at the same time. There's no time. It's just ever present. It was there the whole time. I just didn't recognize it. And then comes the bliss. Then comes the peacefulness. And they're all different levels. There's all these different levels, of this spiritual mind and so on, to be able to help us to to recognize what we're capable of, to get into that 85%, maybe, you know, that we're theoretically thinking, well, maybe that's where it is. But, you know, what we are is just part of all this. It's just, we're just the machine that is just processing all this stuff and so on. And now we're going to learn to be able to process from a whole different point of view. You know, we have a point of view of whatever age we are, whether we're 20 years old or we're 30 years old or 40 years, you know, when you're 50 years old, you have a different point of view than when you're 20. If you're a man, you have a different point of view than a woman. All these different things. If you're an ordinary being, you have a point of view. If you're a bodhisattva, you have a different point of view. And if you're a Buddha, you have a different point of view. So we're learning these things, you know. So 101, Buddhism 101, is just the means to be able to identify this vocabulary, to say, yes, all these things are there. And just like whatever your career is, whatever tools you use to manifest your career and so on, now we're learning meditative tools. We're learning spiritual tools. What's the goal? Everybody needs to answer that for themselves. You know, if it's enlightenment, if it's liberation from this suffering, from this confusion, then this is what we're talking about. If you're learning, if you're learning this, if your goal is to become a yogi who just feels superior to everybody else, and everybody else is just bringing all their wealth and money and respect and everything because you want to have the notoriety of being a yogi or something like this, or a priest or a rabbi or an imam or whatever spiritual being you might contrive, just because so that they can, it's a job for them, then that's something else. You know, what we're looking for as Buddhists is liberation.
Can I ask a question, Lance?
Of course, please.
So just rewinding a little bit, I think you were talking about the bardo of dreaming for a few minutes. And you were saying that if, or through our meditation, we can get glimpses, and some of those dreams are going to start to make sense to us in one way or the other. Is that right?
That's true.
So is anybody at the center, at the Dirkun Center, teaching dream yoga, or do you know?
It's way past what we do. I mean, you know, you start getting it. We start touching on it. We start looking at it in the Mahamudra book that we're studying. It goes in and talks about it and so on. But to actually begin to really get into that is a huge commitment. You know, to get into these higher things. It's not something you do in a weekend.
No.
It's something that, you know, has to be cultivated, built upon, and stabilize all this stuff, because you get out there and, you know, there's all kinds of dangers that pull you back. I mean, it's not like you're going to explode or something like that, you know, but what happens is that you become disillusioned when it doesn't work out for you because you weren't prepared for what it is. It's like going up in an airplane and jumping out of the airplane without a parachute. Or you got the parachute, but now you're at, you know, 80,000 feet and the parachute ain't going to help you. You're going to get out there and you're not going to be able to breathe. And you didn't know, oh, I needed to have some oxygen. I didn't know I needed that.
Right.
So you got to be prepared for all these things. So I know these things sound very romantic. They sound very idealistic. Dream yoga, Tumo, 4 yogas, 6 yogas in Naropa. Man, I want those things. But we got to be very patient.
So
And we
is the
got to
dream
be
yoga,
ready. We got to be ready to give up a lot to get it.
is that part of the 6 yogas of Naropam?
Yes. Dream yoga is part of the 6 yogas in Naropa.
Yeah.
So, in our lifestyle, and I think we all share the same kind of lifestyle. We're beginners. We may have had some glimpses, we've had our eyes open, but like you were telling me about your friend, I mean, he made great sacrifices. I don't even know his whole story, but you just told me something very simple, but it sounds like he gave up everything to be able to accomplish whatever he has done. And if we talk to him, he may say, I haven't accomplished anything yet.
Yeah, that'll probably be his answer.
Yeah. And if you go to any of the lamas, if you go any of the yogis, they'll tell you the same thing. I haven't accomplished anything yet.
Isn't it true that it doesn't matter what you call it or who you're going with? It still takes the same amount of time and energy and concentration to attain these things.
Well, for different people, it's going to take different time. It's going to take different amount of energy and so on because of their karma.
Right.
So we can't, be too hasty in being able to say that all our experiences are going to be exactly the same. But what I can say is that it's all based upon commitment. It's all based upon renunciation. It's all based upon the eightfold path, the 4 noble truths. It's all based on the Paramitas. It's all based on this stuff that we're learning in Buddhism 101. And this is why I'm always trying to say to you, you got to memorize this stuff. Because when when you finally, get to a level, for you to be able to get to a level, to meet a teacher, they're going to interview you. And if you don't know this stuff, they're going to say, well, I'm sorry, I'm not your teacher. Because they're going to interview you just like you interview them. And they know it's going to be dangerous for someone who's not prepared. Just like going up in the airplane without the parachute and without the oxygen tank. Because they know what it is.
So in this case, it sounds like the teacher chooses the student and not the other way around.
Well, it is a reciprocal. It is both ways. The student has to approach the teacher. The teacher's not walking around and saying, oh, I choose you. It doesn't happen that way. The student has to have the aspiration. The student has to have the action, has to have the accomplishments to be able to get to the level to recognize the teacher.
But when it comes to that point, you have to be at that level to where you know what you're doing and you're committed to be on the path.
Well, yeah, you gotta have the tools. You've gotta, yes. So the Buddha, we look at the Buddha, or we look at Milarepa, these great stories of these great spiritual leaders in Buddhism. And maybe it's true, I know it's true in other traditions as well, but I'll just stay with the Buddha. It appears that in his lifetime, he was born a prince. He had all that he possibly could have in a lifetime, by a human being. Had power, he had, ability to be able to be a warrior. He had all this stuff and everything. And he sat, for 6 years and didn't attain enlightenment. But then he realized a couple things. He strengthened his body. Then in one night, then he attained enlightenment. And he had 3 demons that appeared to him. And he was able to conquer those demons. And then he had enlightenment. That sounds simple. So, well, I can do that. That sounds really great. That's easy. One lifetime he did that. Milarepa, similar story, but a little more dramatic. Milarepa, here he was born into a wealthy family that the money was stolen from them. And then he went to become a black magician to get even with the people that stole the money. And he did these terrible things and killed these people, and then realized what a horrible mistake he made. And he looked for redemption. And he started going to different teachers to help him to purify himself. And then he finally found this one teacher who was just very, very, very strict and really very hard on him and everything. But after years and years and years of hard labor, then he was ready to be able to be taught. And then he was able to go into his meditations and finish his purification practice and so on. He did that in one lifetime. What we don't see in either the case of the Buddha or in the case of Milarepa is what their prior lifetimes were. We don't see all the different sufferings that they went through, all the different renunciations, all the different commitments that they had to make, all the different work that they had to make to be able to get to that one lifetime. So we're in a similar thing. We may not recognize all our past work, although we are very fortunate to be here right now. It's the result of all that past work. And, and maybe we've had possibilities of going to the dark side, being some kind of, bad people, taking advantage of other people and so on like that. But we chose this noble path, this virtuous path. And this is all because of our karma and so on. So now it's up to us. What are we going to do with the rest of our life? It becomes the question.
So how do you recognize for yourself, for example, that you're pushing too hard and, wanting to obtain enlightenment in one lifetime, and everybody's telling you that you have to have patience, you just need to wait here at the palace, listen to your parents and be with your child, with your family, with your wife, kind of like what Siddhartha Gautama heard like a few thousand years ago, or you just know that this is your karma and you need to go forth on the path to do what needs to be done in order to attain enlightenment.
You have to find your natural mind. You have to discover what is natural for you. And when you stop looking, it comes. You have to work toward it. And we're going to continue this conversation. You have to continue to work for it. But when all the pieces start coming together, then you begin to see the doors opening for you. The figurative doors, and you begin to recognize the opportunities, and you have to seize the opportunities. And sometimes it comes at some expense. It comes at a time expense, it comes at a material expense, the expense of your family, there's things that have to, be moved around, but it all depends on what your commitment is and what is natural for you. If you're creating suffering to do what it is that you want to do, you'll regret it. It'll hold you back. You won't do it in clear conscience. It won't be a virtuous movement. So we have to recognize virtue and non-virtue. We're family men, and if we went and just tossed our families out, for the sake of doing these other things and not doing anything to be sure that, you know, your families are cared for in some way or another, you know, that would be a terrible mistake. If you're a virtuous person. If you're a non-virtuous person, wouldn't even enter your mind. So you wouldn't be a proper vessel in that place. You know, you'd be eliminated early in the game.
Jumanji.
What's that? Jumanji?
Jumanji.
Was that the film Jumanji? I never saw it.
Yeah. My kids like to watch it. You have like 3 lives, and they're like a tattoo with 3 lines on your hand once you die. I don't know if anybody has watched it or not, but
Well, yeah, all
because
these
my kids
stories,
do.
there's so many stories about these things. You're right.
Yeah.
So this wisdom awareness, you see, is a perfection that we have to work for. All this we have to work for, but there's a natural way to do it. If we try and force these things into working, you're not going to have the results that you're looking for. You know, it's going to create anxiety. If you don't have peace of mind every day in your spiritual path, then you're doing it wrong. Every day you should not have anxiety with spirituality. Spirituality should relieve your anxiety. Remove the time element out of it. Just say, it ain't going to happen this life, and it don't matter. I might have 3 more lives. I might have 16 lives. How many lives do you think you've had already? You know, this gets into the mythology of the Buddhism. I say mythology because I can't prove it to you, you know, but this is what they say. They say we've had thousands of lifetimes. We've had millions of lifetimes. How many gazillions of beings have there been in the 7.5 billion years that the planet, that the universe has existed? You know, what we're doing, you can't even measure it. It's so small. So for us to be able to qualify and say, oh, this is going to happen in this one lifetime is ludicrous if it doesn't happen naturally. We don't have that much power. So if we just give that part up and say, okay, just let me live every day happily, every day spiritually, and then the rest will take care of itself. Move in slow chunks. You know, set obtainable goals for yourself. Isn't that what you're a counselor? You know, when you're working with somebody, you know, you're not trying to get them to the mountain. You're trying to say, well, set an obtainable goal for yourself to make a change. And we work towards that. And if it takes 4 or 5 lifetimes, so what? How many lifetimes have you had already?
The way that I see it with spiritual practice is that I probably still get feelings of anxiety or anger or bliss sometimes, you know, but I can see through it. And
When you say
not
see
necessarily,
through it, what do you mean?
I'm aware of it to the point where I'm like, okay, I see it arising and it doesn't affect the way that my day goes.
So what do? You push through the anxiety? You're talking about anxiety over your spirituality? Is that what you're talking about?
I think I mean it's the same, it's the same thing, right? In the sense that you know, when I'm meditating, I work with everything that arises within me, in my mind and in my heart. And it can be anything that is, you know, been through the day. But just the fact that I can see that my body's reacting to this thing that happened to me today and I'm angry, then my awareness, my spirituality is not affected that much as it was before,
So
because
what
I
do you
was
do-
just
what
like
do you do in that
carried away,
situation?
because I was just carried away by that, wave of anger into
So what do you do?
doing.
So what do you
What
do?
do I do?
Yeah.
I just observe it and I just let it go. It's just kind of like waves raising and falling back into the ocean.
All right, so you're not pushing it then.
Right.
Okay, well then that's wise. That's right. That's wise.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Lance.
Okay, you're welcome. So, any other questions, comments? We've got time. We can talk. So if anybody has anything you want to discuss, please speak up. So, going back now and reviewing, but now putting things together now a little bit more concisely. So we talk about that we're doing the 3 mind trainings. We're training in superior morality or patience, or excuse me, or discipline. If we don't have the discipline, we're not going to be able to accomplish the other things. We got to have the discipline. So I'm going to put it into another context for you. When the Buddha Shakyamuni first began to teach, he taught at a level that was called the Hinayana. This is the teaching of the elders. This is the basic teachings. And the people that he was teaching were all kinds of miscreants of one type or another, murderers and thieves and liars and all this kind of stuff, who all wanted to, find this peace that the Buddha had. So he said, well, the first thing you guys got to do is you got to cut your hair and you got to take off your clothes and you got to put on robes. And what he was saying to them is you got to start disciplining yourself and you got to stop comparing yourself to other people. So if we all look the same, then there's that much less that you have to think about. So he was instilling in people discipline. So for the first 500 years of Buddhism, that was the main thrust of what was being taught, was discipline, moral ethics. If you don't have moral ethics, if you don't have a firm ground on which to learn these things and practice these things and develop a meditation, then when you get a little bit higher, there's no foundation, it's all going to collapse, right? The analogy of building a house on sand. So you got to have discipline. So the first moral training or the first perfection training is discipline or moral ethics, which means the generosity that we talked about in detail, the moral ethics itself, virtue and non-virtue. We talked about patience, right? So these are elements of discipline that we have to develop. Then we go into meditative concentration, superior thought. So we have to develop our intellectual investigation tools to be able to look at these things that can't be seen, that can't be weighed. They're abstract. They're not physical things, to overcome our emotions. Our emotions can't be weighed, can't be measured, but yet they are things that control our lives. So we need to understand that. So we need to develop superior thought, meditative concentration. That's the second of the 3 mind trainings. And the third mind training is the the wisdom awareness of being able to go in over and over and over again and allow these glimpses to become visions and visions and visions, more and more of what it is to be a spiritual being, to look at the spiritual life. So the first one is the Hinayana, the discipline. The second one, the intellectualization, that's the Mahayana. That's the you know, the emptiness. That's the two truths. That's the Bodhisattva hero. And then the third one, the wisdom awareness, is the Buddha awareness, is the Vajrayana, the wisdom of the Buddha, to become the Buddha, to understand what it is to become the Buddha, to have experience with becoming the Buddha, glimpse after glimpse, little bit after little bit. At some point, we may hit a threshold where bang, it all opens up to us. And maybe it happens that way in the beginning, but then the way it lands on us, we apprehend it, or rather we comprehend it, we recognize it glimpse after glimpse. You know, Ken Wilber says we're already enlightened. We just haven't recognized it. So we recognize it in glimpse after glimpse, what our enlightened nature is. So here's an analogy. Here's a metaphor. That if you these 6 things, if you look at these as pearls that are on a wrist bracelet, like a mala, you know, this is 20 of them, but imagine that you got these 6 things, and imagine one of these pearls is generosity. Another one of these pearls is discipline. Another one of these pearls is patience. Another one of these pearls is meditative concentration. And another one of these pearls is wisdom awareness. That's 5. The 6th one is the string that these are all strung on, which is perseverance. You won't have generosity if you don't have perseverance. You won't have discipline if you don't have perseverance. You won't have patience if you don't have perseverance. You won't have meditative concentration if you don't have perseverance. And you won't have wisdom awareness if you don't have perseverance. So when you break it down like this, it becomes more comprehensible, you know, for our minds, for us to be able to create these images for ourselves of who it is that we are, what we're trying to be, where it is that we're trying to go. If we don't have these goals for ourselves, you know, we're just going aimlessly around. And this is why the deity yoga is so important, because it's through the deity yoga that we learn those examples. Otherwise, it's just our imagination running crazy. We've got the Buddha, but you know, that's an awful lot to put into one thing. It can be done, but it's very difficult. It takes quite a being to be able to do that. It takes quite a lot of karma. It takes quite a lot of commitment to be able to do that. But there's help. The help is the deity yoga. So is this making some sense?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
It does, Nance.
Okay, good. Anybody else? Okay.
Michael, you got a heart on your screen.
That's my reaction.
I
Don't you use
love
reaction
it.
like this?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. A Zoom reaction to
So-
Lance.
Thank you very much. So
Cool.
once again, you know, what we're doing here in these talks is just, you know, just scratching the surface for you. Just, you know, and you know, if you need to get some books, you need to read the books, you need to make the time, you need to find teachers, you know, and I know right now it's a difficult time because of the coronavirus, but at the same time, there's teachings going on all the time on Zoom. I'm in a retreat right now. It's just a weekend retreat, and it's great. And it's a basic retreat. You guys could go in tomorrow if you want. Kempo Samdup is doing teachings, and almost every teacher that I know is doing Zoom teachings. So, what I'm doing is just very, very simple, basic stuff, just giving you the vocabulary. You go into these teachings with these lamas, and you're really gonna, you're gonna learn some things, and then you begin to really put some, forgive the expression, you put some meat on the bone. But where I talk in 2 hours about a very broad subject, they'll talk about in 2 hours just one little aspect of it. So it's a much bigger commitment. And you gotta be prepared to do that. If you want to take a pill, I got a pill for you.
Give me the enlightenment pill.
Call me up someday, we'll talk about it. But if you want that pill, but you ain't got no control with that pill, I can tell you that.
I know there's an enlightenment pill.
The only thing that you can do is naturally. That's how it's done, naturally. Whatever you do with the pill, you can do naturally by yourself. And that's the way to do it. Because when you go into the bardo, there ain't no pills. So there's always more. I'm not even going to go into anything more tonight. This is familiarizing ourselves with the Buddha mind is what this is. Action bodhicitta. The whole enlightened mind. Yes, somebody said something, William?
Yeah, Lance, is this kind of reminds me of the wax on, wax off.
Okay, explain that?
The Karate Kid. Have
you seen that?
You seen the movie? Yeah.
Not for a long time.
And the teacher takes the kid to his car, and he says, "Here, wax my car." And he doesn't realize what he's doing. The kid doesn't realize what he's doing, but the teacher's teaching him, teaching his body to react in this way to wax on and wax off of the car. So, but it's a long-term thing. He didn't do it just overnight.
Right.
And that's the same thing with what we're talking about here. You don't do it just overnight, no matter how much waxing you do.
Right. And you don't do it in what seems to be one lifetime.
Yeah. It's practice. That's the reason they call it practice.
That's right.
One of my teachers had a thing about somebody come up and asked, how many lifetimes do I have? And the teacher said, well, you've got 6 lifetimes left. And he said, oh my goodness, I got 6 lifetimes left. And another youngster comes up and he says, how many lifetimes do I have? He says, you see that forest over there? You see the trees in the forest over there? You see the leaves on the trees in the forest over there? He says, that's how many lifetimes you have to go before you realize. And the guy says, oh boy, I'm glad. Yeah, now I know what I'm going to do. And it's an attitude difference. You have to have that proper attitude toward your teacher, toward what you're learning, and toward what you want to do. And it all has to be good. can't have any selfishness involved in it. I'm doing this, and I'm doing this for all sentient beings. No selfishness involved. I'm doing this for them. But as I'm doing this for them, I'm getting something out of it too. But it's, you know.
So those are the two benefits.
Mhm.
That's always called the two benefits.
No.
So that was a good analogy. That was a good story being able to tell that. Yes, that person needed to have that goal,
Right?
that it is obtainable.
Yes.
It's going to take a lot, but now that I know it's obtainable, I'm willing to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, nobody wants to live their life in vain. You know, and going back to the four thoughts to turn the mind, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Remember, right view, the first of the Eightfold Path is that enlightenment is possible. Freedom is possible. Freedom is yours. That's the right view. Freedom. That's the right view. Freedom.
I like the wax on, wax off analogy, William. I like that.
Okay.
Hello, Lance. Hi.
Yes.
This is Norman. So I have a quick question on the PDF you sent me by the email.
Yes.
So you said effort, and then at the end of this PDF document, it's the last.
Yes.
Yes, it says effort and supports all three trainings. The first is listening, and thinking and meditation.
That's correct.
So yeah, so these three work together as a process of how it works, right?
That's correct.
And yeah, but sometimes I find while you're receiving things and then you think about the things and you try to meditate, and things doesn't really go smoothly. It doesn't go from this. For instance, if you're listening to something, it doesn't come to your thoughts. It doesn't motivate you to think about it.
Yes.
And sometimes it's stuck with the while you're thinking.
Yes.
So it doesn't drive you to from thinking. It doesn't drive you to meditating.
That's correct. That's right.
Yeah. So I'm trying to ask if you have an example or if you have this similar experience with me.
Well, of course, and the answer is that you need more tools. You need more objectivity in your life. You need a teacher. You need to make a commitment to that. And we both recognize that, you know, you've got a family, a young family, and you have priorities, and it may be difficult to be able to do that in a big way right now, but you can start. And as soon as you can be, you know, you've already started, I think, because, you know, we've known each other for something over a year now. And, you know, you want to do this, but, you know, you've got these other priorities that you got to take care of, and you need to do those things. But recognize that you've got another 30, 40, 50 years in your life, maybe more. So don't push yourself so hard and make yourself unhappy. You know, do what you can. You know, if you can't go out because to go out to get a teacher, to go to the temple and be in teachings, read books. Make the commitment there. Make obtainable goals for yourself and talk to your Dharma brothers and sisters and to a teacher and talk about these things.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Makes sense.
So I'm not the best person to talk to, but I'm always willing to talk to you or anybody else, you know, and maybe there might be something I can suggest, a book or something like that might be helpful to you. So, you know, if you want to do that, we could talk, you know, at another time during a week or something.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense for me. Yeah. So yeah.
Is that the correct answer?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, anybody else? Okay, all right, well then let's do our dedications. And so we should go to our prayer book and let's go to page 18. The dedication, Lenny's dedication. So Bonnie, will you be our Omze tonight? Continue. So we're going to go through and we're going to read about 5 pages here. They're not big pages. So just listen to the words if you don't have them in front of you. And these are very wise words here. And Bonnie does a wonderful job in her diction. Okay, Bonnie.
Norji Chang, Talupa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Dharma Lord Gampopa, Padma Drupa, and Lord Drinkumpa. Please bestow upon us the most auspicious blessing of all the Kagyu Lamas. By this virtue, may I achieve the all-knowing state, and may all who travel on the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara by defeating all enemies, confusion, the cause of suffering. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind. Where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. I pray that the Lama may have good health. I pray that the Lama may have long life. I pray that your Dharma activities spread far and wide. I pray that I may not be separated from you. As Manjushri, the warrior, realized the ultimate state, and as did Samattabhadra, I will follow in their path and fully dedicate all the merit for all sentient beings. By the blessing of the Buddha who attained the 3 kayas, by the blessing of the truth of the unchanging Dharma as such, by the blessing of the indivisible Sangha order, may the merit I share bear fruit. The Korma prayer. By the virtues collected in the 3 times by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate root of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Trinkumpa Ratna Shri, who is omniscient, Lord of the Dharma, Master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. Dedication prayer by Lord Jingten Songgon. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas. Divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, yogins, yoginis, and dakinis dwelling in the 10 directions. Please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the 3 times by myself and all sentient beings in samsara and nirvana in the innate root of virtue not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara or rebirth, as a Shravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Maras and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I in any case gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo.
Om, ah, hom. Om, ah, hom. Om, ah, hom. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha and all the enlightened ones. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Lance.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Lance.
Thank you, Lance.
We'll continue with chapter 18 of the book. So I'll send out a message and everything and send the outline.
Thank you, everybody.
You.
Thank you, Bonnie. You did a wonderful
Success.
job. Thank you.